Hello, I want to welcome you. Today we're going to talk about the writing process. And earlier in a different video, I had referred to the writing process as recursive, herky-jerky, messy, and nonlinear. That's actually a quote from Ralph Fletcher and his wife Joanne Portalupi from 2001. But to me, it just really describes what the writing process is all about. It used to be when I was long ago, in the early 90s, when I was teaching second grade, we did writing workshop. But the way that I did it is on Mondays, we would do our pre-writing. On Tuesdays, here, let me scooch this down a little bit. Mondays, we did pre-writing. Tuesdays, we did our drafting. Wednesdays, we would do our revising of our piece. Thursdays we would edit, and Fridays we would publish our piece. So it was really, and then guess what? What happened on Monday? We would start all over again with a brand new piece. We would do some pre-writing, drafting, The day that I didn't like at all would be Wednesdays and Thursdays, because on those days we were doing the revising and the editing, and I had 28 students in my class, and I would have a lineup from my desk to the door out into the hallway of kids, probably 10 kids long, wanting to conference, which was great. That's what the purpose was. We wanted to conference and talk about their writing, but it got to be very long. And what do you suppose those kids were doing when they were in line? Guess what? They were not writing or revising. So the way that I did writing workshop, although I loved it, was probably not very good. I mean, it really wasn't when I think back on it. First of all, for a couple of reasons. Because of the way I was conferencing, it would have made much more sense for me to actually get up and go to the children at their desk while they're conferencing, while I was conferencing with them, rather than having them come up to me and wait in line. But second of all, because we all know with writing, sometimes we write a quick piece and it might only take us a few days or maybe not even that long to write, to take it through the entire writing process from where the idea is born to where we kind of spit the idea out onto paper, and then when we start working with it to make it in a form that we want to share with others. Some days that process is very short. Other days it's very long. We might spend a whole lot of time on our pre-writing, so coming up with the ideas are kind of percolating in our head. Then we might do our drafting. We might be working on our paper or writing it down, but then we're thinking, wait, I need to know more. I need to find out some more information before I can keep going. In that case, we're going back to the pre-writing to find out more information. It's still part of our writing process, but it's not just, Monday, Tuesday, a lockstep pattern. Then I might find the information I need. I continue to my drafting. I get to my revising, and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm missing a whole piece here, a whole section that needs to be covered. So what do? I go back to my drafting. I may even go back to pre-writing. So you can see that the steps really are herky-jerky, recursive, messy, and non-linear, and not even circular like this. That's not the way it goes. These are the steps, and I will talk about each step individually, but I want to just give you an overview of what I mean when I talk about the writing process. It's the process from taking a piece, just wherever you're at in the writing, within the writing process, but you might be taking a piece from pre-writing to drafting, from revising back to drafting, and so on. So it's very recursive. The next slide, we talk about pre-writing. And here, when we think about pre-writing, we can think about it as stretching. It's a way of warming up to the task of writing. It's rehearsing. A lot of times we might just be rehearsing what we want to say in our mind. It might not be on paper yet, but pre-writing certainly can be going on in your head. When I was working on my dissertation many years ago, in 96, it was interesting because I would write, and then I would go teach, read, write, and then I would go to bed. And then while I was in bed, I would go to bed my husband is an early to bed person, so as soon as we went to bed at 10 o'clock, I would hit the pillow and fall asleep. But it's like the whole time that I was sleeping, I was still rehearsing in my brain about what I wanted to say. So then when I would get up at 5 in the morning, boom, 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 I could just go ahead and start writing again. So rehearsing can happen in a number of different ways. I'm not saying, that doesn't always happen to me, but in that particular case, I was so immersed in my writing for my dissertation, I was rehearsing at all times, it felt like. Pre-writing can also be planning out. What kinds of things are you thinking about doing? Making a plan, sketching it out, thinking. You might even draw a little bit, especially with the younger grades. Their pre-writing might involve them drawing a picture and thinking about where they want to go with something. Wondering, thinking, gathering. So the thinking and gathering, that might encompass, if I'm going to write a piece about gardening, I might need to gather information about gardening. So I might need to be reading all different kinds of books about gardening, things like that. Or if I am trying a new genre in my writing, that might be my pre-writing. I might be reading all kinds of books or materials within that genre so that I have a sense of how to go about constructing the piece myself. So in the classroom, it might look like students might be making a list, they might be talking about a story with one another, they might be reading, looking for an idea, or they might just be sitting thinking. So it can look very different depending on what the child is going to be working on. Drafting is really the part where we're writing with fluency. It can be messy, but not sloppy in thought. So your draft does not have to be neat. Things don't necessarily need to be spelled right, but yet not sloppy in thought. I think that's a really key point. It's full of risk taking. It's fluid. So you're writing. The pencil or the pen is on the paper. The fingers are on the keyboard. It's just fluid. It's going. It's separate from transcription. We do not need to be editing as we do this. For example, I guess as I type, I often am editing just as I'm typing because I'm noticing I'm spelling words wrong or things like that. But it is mostly we want to get that draft down. We want to get those words down on paper. Anne Lamott, in a book called Bird by Bird years ago, and excuse my French here, but she said it's really important you just get that shitty first draft down. And I think that's really important for us to think about. We need to get that first draft of our thoughts on paper so that we can then work with it. And again, drafting is nonlinear as well, because as we're drafting, we may go back to the pre-writing stage. The next stage is revising. And with revising, there are all kinds of different possibilities about what might happen here. When we think about it, it might be it's improving your writing, it's improving the composition of it. It might be radical surgery. So it might be something where we are really going crazy and taking the whole thing apart. It might be a series of drafts and then you're kind of trying to work and put them together. It might be change. You might change the beginning. You might add a section or layer it. You might prune by deleting a whole part. You could change the order. You might change the genre. Maybe you don't like the tone or the way the model that you're using. So you might change the genre from a letter to a persuasive piece. Who knows? You might slow down the hot spot. And what that means is there might be a part where a lot of the action is taking. We call that the hot spot. You might actually slow down that action in there so that the reader can savor it a little bit more. You might focus on just one part and work on revising there. You might break the whole thing into chunks or chapters. So let's say you have a whole, or one of your students has a whole book about their adventures that summer. It might actually be broken into chunks or chapters versus just one long piece. Okay, the next slide is about editing. Editing, we talk about the surface features. We're looking at the things that are glaring for the reader. We want to use the correct language conventions. You can think of it also, and we're going to be proofreading, and you can think of it as providing first aid. I'm so sorry about this phone. You can think about it as using first aid. You're giving first aid to your piece. One thing I really like to talk about here is something called reader courtesy. When we get to the editing stage, I talk a lot to the students about, as a writer, you need to be courteous or kind to the people that are reading your work. And to do that, you want to make it as easy for them to read as possible, as far as no typos, no messy writing, things like that. So you want to just use your manners in that sense. We might be using things like, there might be some editing checklists so the kids can do it themselves. There might be some peer checklists, so two kids are working together and going through the editing process, kind of proofreading for one another. We can diagnose student needs based on their edited work. And so what this means is I might be conferencing with someone, I'm looking at their piece, and I'm seeing all the things that are going on with their editing and where there are errors and things like that. Then I can selectively teach one or two things for them to work on. I don't want to take a look at that whole paper as a whole and say, you need to fix this, this, and this. What I want to do is I want to just take a look at it, think about one or two things that will make this paper even better, and talk to the student about that and about fixing that, about working with that. Goodness, this phone is crazy. Okay, I don't know why it's even in here. I apologize. Okay, the last one is publishing. Again, we're talking about the writing process, but not all pieces will get to this stage. The pieces that do get to the publishing stage, what we would hope that they would be authentic, so they would be and purposeful. They would be written for real audiences, or for real purposes. For example, when I was teaching in Farmington, there was a first grader who one winter they went out onto the playground, and it was kind of a slushy spring actually, and the snow was melting, and the kids came in and they just reeked. They all smelled horribly. What had ended up happening is some people throughout the winter had let their dogs go to the bathroom in the places where the kids were then playing on this particular day. And so there was, it was just a mess. It was a big mess for everybody involved, all the kids. And so this little first grader took it upon herself to write a letter to the Farmington Independent in Minnesota and talked about, people, please take care of your jobs, clean up your dogs, clean up after them, things like that. And so what a perfect, authentic, and purposeful, formal, motivating kind of assignment for her. And the thing is, she took it upon herself, but let's try and do that within our classroom. The pieces that are published, let's make sure they have real audiences. Okay, that is it for the writing process. The main thing I want you to think about, it is nonlinear. There are different parts, but we're going back and forth within the process as we're working on our writing. And not everything needs to be edited or published. All right, have a great day.